The drawbridge creaked beneath Lady Eleanor Thompson's feet as she faced the towering figure in tarnished armor. Her midnight blue dress fluttered in the dawn breeze, a stark contrast to the grey stone fortress that would become her prison, or salvation. "This marriage will save your family's lands," Sir Roland Blackwood's gruff voice echoed across the courtyard. "But make no mistake, Lady Eleanor. My knowledge of ancient farming methods comes with a steep price." What Eleanor didn't know was that this mysterious knight's forgotten agricultural wisdom would not only save her family farm, but transform everything she believed about medieval innovation and the man behind the battle-scarred armor. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Thompson estate had known better days. As Eleanor stood in the withered wheat fields, the morning mist did little to hide the devastation that had befallen their ancestral farm. 2 consecutive crop failures had brought their once prosperous holding to the brink of collapse, and her father, Lord Thomas Thompson, lay bedridden with the weight of impending ruin pressing on his chest. "Eleanor, dear heart," her mother, Lady Margaret, called softly from the manor house doorway. Her usually pristine silver-blonde hair hung in loose strands around her face, aged a decade in mere months. "Your father wishes to see you." The study where Lord Thomas convened his final councils now served as his sick room. Eleanor entered to find him propped against pillows, his once robust frame now gaunt beneath the quilted coverlet. Maps covered in ledgers and desperate calculations surrounded him like the remnants of failed strategies. "Eleanor," he rasped, gesturing for her to sit beside him, "our debts come due at harvest's end. Without a miracle, we'll lose everything our family has built for 7 generations." His weathered hand found hers. "The bank has given us one final option." "What option, Father?" Eleanor's voice trembled despite her efforts to maintain composure. "Lord." Thomas exchanged a meaningful glance with Lady Margaret before continuing. "There's a certain knight, Sir Roland Blackwood. He owns vast tracts of fertile land north of here, and his holdings are renowned for their bountiful harvests, even in drought years." He paused, gathering strength. "He's proposed a marriage alliance. Your hand for his lands, his wealth, and his mysterious farming knowledge." Eleanor felt the room spin. Marriage had always been a practical matter among the landed gentry, but this was different. "What do you know of this man?" "Precious little," her mother interjected, wringing her hands. "He's reclusive, battle-scarred from years of warfare. They say he returned from the Holy Lands with more than just wounds. He speaks of ancient techniques, methods his men claim can make barren soil yield abundance." "They say many things, Lord," Thomas added gravely. "Some whisper he learned forbidden knowledge. Others claim his success comes from understanding old methods forgotten by modern farmers. All we know for certain is that he's our last hope." Eleanor rose, moving to the window overlooking their failing fields. The weight of generations pressed upon her shoulders. The Thompson estate had survived plagues, wars, and famines. How could it end because of failed harvests and mounting debts? "When would this marriage take place?" she asked quietly. "Within the week. Blackwood is eager. He says every day we delay is another day the soil suffers." Lord Thomas coughed, a harsh, rattling sound. "My physicians say I may not see the summer's end. I need to know our people, our legacy, will be protected." Eleanor had always known duty would guide her path, but she'd imagined a union with a neighboring lord's son, perhaps someone familiar. Not this mysterious warrior-turned-farmer who guarded secrets that could save or destroy them. "What say you, Eleanor?" her mother pressed gently. "We cannot force this choice upon you." But they could, and they all knew it. The estate's salvation rested on this decision. Eleanor thought of the families who had worked their land for generations, of the village that depended on the estate for sustenance and protection. I'll meet him first, she decided. Tomorrow, then I'll give my answer. The following day brought no mercy from the encroaching summer heat. Eleanor dressed carefully in her riding habit of deep green wool, her auburn hair pinned severely beneath her cap. As she descended the manor steps, she found her brother Henry waiting with 2 horses. "You don't have to do this," Henry said, his boyish face set with determination. At 17, he possessed their father's stubborn jaw and their mother's keen intellect. "I could challenge him to combat for the insult of this proposal." Eleanor touched his face gently. "And what would happen to our father? Our people? Your chivalric gestures won't pay our debts, brother." The ride to Blackwood's estate took most of the morning. As they crested the final hill, Eleanor gasped. While their own fields lay brown and stunted, Blackwood's lands spread green and lush across the valley. Neat rows of crops stretched toward. The horizon and the air itself felt different, richer somehow. "How is this possible?" Henry muttered, sharing her astonishment. The fortress itself was an unusual hybrid, part defensive stronghold, part working farm. The outer walls enclosed not just living quarters, but workshops, granaries, and what appeared to be experimental gardens. As they approached, Eleanor noticed workers tending plots with careful precision, their movements suggesting ritual rather than mere labor. A steward met them at the gates, leading them to a great hall that smelled of herbs and leather, rather than the stale rushes common to most keeps. Moments later, heavy footsteps announced Sir Roland's arrival. He was taller than Eleanor expected, his frame still powerful despite obvious battle damage. His face bore a network of scars, and his left arm moved stiffly as he gestured to seats. But it was his eyes that arrested her, deep grey, intelligent, and holding secrets she couldn't begin to fathom. "Lady Eleanor," he acknowledged, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "I trust the ride was not too taxing." "Not as taxing as the questions it raised," she replied, meeting his gaze directly. "Your lands thrive while ours wither." "How?" A ghost of approval flickered across his features. "Direct good. I've no patience for court games." He moved to a side table, returning with ancient-looking documents and what appeared to be seed samples. "What I'm about to share with you is knowledge most consider heretical. In the East, I learned from scholars who preserved the wisdom of older civilizations. The Romans knew things about soil and crops we've forgotten." The next hour passed in a fascinating discourse about crop rotation, companion planting, and soil amendment techniques Eleanor had never imagined. Henry listened with growing interest as Roland demonstrated using colored sand how different plants could enrich or deplete soil nutrients. "If this knowledge exists," Eleanor interrupted, "why don't others use it?" Roland's laugh was harsh. "Fear, tradition, pride. Priests claim it's sorcery, lords believe their ancient methods are sacred, and farmers, they fear change more than they fear starvation. Yet you implemented these changes successfully, not without resistance," he admitted. "I lost half my workforce the first season. Those who remained did so out of desperation, or perhaps they saw something in me worth trusting." Eleanor studied this enigmatic man who spoke of farming with the passion others reserved for warfare or religion. "And if I marry you, you'll share this knowledge with our estate?" "I'll do more than share it. I'll demonstrate it, transform your failing fields into the most productive in the region." His expression turned serious. "But understand this, the work is demanding, the methods foreign. You'll face mockery and superstition from neighboring estates." "We already face ruin," Eleanor pointed out. "What's reputation compared to survival?" Something shifted in Roland's demeanor, a softening almost imperceptible. "Your father spoke truly. You are practical." He paused. "I require a marriage agreement, not merely a business alliance, but I I'm not an easy man to live with. Eleanor rose, moving to the window. The green fields beckoned, promising hope her own estate lacked. None of this is easy, Sir Roland, but if you can truly save our lands and our people, then I accept your terms. The wedding took place 3 days later in the Thompson Estate Chapel. Eleanor wore her grandmother's ivory silk gown, aged to a soft cream by time and tradition. The ceremony was brief, attended only by immediate family and essential witnesses. Roland's men had arrived the previous day, bringing with them carts of seeds, tools, and mysterious implements Eleanor couldn't identify. As she spoke her vows, Eleanor studied her new husband's profile. The morning light revealed more grey in his dark hair than she'd initially noticed, and his right hand bore marks that suggested years of hard labour despite his noble status. When he turned to face her, something vulnerable flickered in his expression before the warrior's mask returned. "By the power vested in me," Father Benedict concluded, his aged voice wavering slightly, "I pronounce you man and wife." The wedding feast was modest by necessity, but Eleanor's staff had managed to prepare traditional dishes despite their strained resources. As the evening progressed, she noticed Roland conversing quietly with their head farmer, sketching diagrams on scraps of parchment. His intensity seemed to ease around those who worked the land. "You love the soil," she observed, joining them during a lull in celebration. Roland looked up, surprise briefly crossing his features. "The soil feeds us all, my lady. It deserves respect, not just demands." The head farmer, old James, nodded eagerly. "Sir Roland's been explaining about adding certain plants between rows. Says it'll help the main crops grow stronger." "Show me," Eleanor requested, genuinely curious. What followed was an impromptu lesson that transformed the corner of the celebration hall into a makeshift classroom. Roland spread seeds across the table, explaining how legumes could add essential elements to depleted soil. Eleanor found herself asking questions, drawing connections between botanical principles and agricultural practice. "You've studied," Roland observed approvingly. "My mother insisted I understand estate management," Eleanor replied, "though I confess your knowledge ventures far beyond traditional teachings." "Traditional teachings have left half the countryside starving while the soil exhausts itself," Roland countered, then softened his tone. "I don't mean to be harsh, but I've seen what's possible when we listen to nature rather than impose our will upon it." As evening faded to night, Eleanor realized something unexpected had occurred during their scientific discourse. The Gruff knight who had entered this alliance purely for dynastic purposes had revealed glimpses of the dedicated scholar beneath. His hands, scarred from battle, moved with gentle precision as he handled seeds. His eyes, which had seemed haunted upon arrival, brightened with genuine enthusiasm when discussing his agricultural discoveries. When the celebration finally wound down, Eleanor found herself alone with Roland in what was now their shared solar. The reality of their situation settled over them like a heavy mantle. "We should discuss arrangements," Eleanor began carefully. "I understand this is a marriage of convenience. We needn't pretend—" "Stop!" Roland interrupted, then immediately moderated his tone. "I apologize. What I mean is, neither of us entered this union blindly. But if we're to be successful, not just in saving your estate, but in this marriage, we must be truthful with each other." Eleanor studied him, searching for hidden meaning. "Then I shall be truthful. I'm grateful for what you offer our estate. But I also fear I've bound myself to a man I don't understand. Your knowledge could save us, but your secrecy troubles me." Roland moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. "I'll tell you truths I've shared with no one. In the East, I learned from cultures that never forgot what we abandoned. But I also saw what happens when knowledge becomes power solely for its own sake." He turned back to face her. "My first marriage. She died because I was too focused. On proving my theories to notice her failing health, the admission hung in the air between them. Eleanor felt her misconceptions shifting, revealing a man driven by more than mere scholarly ambition. "I'm sorry," she offered quietly. "As am I," Roland replied. "Which is why I propose this. Complete partnership. I'll teach you everything I know. You'll help me navigate the politics that have always evaded me. Together, we'll save your estate and perhaps find something neither of us sought." Eleanor extended her hand, a gesture both formal and intimate. When Roland took it, his grip was firm but gentle, the hands of a warrior tempered by a farmer's patience. "Partnership, then," she agreed. The next morning, Eleanor awoke before dawn, drawn by unfamiliar sounds from the courtyard. Wrapping herself in a heavy cloak, she peered out to find Roland already directing teams of workers. They were carrying out equipment she'd never seen: complex wooden frames, measuring instruments, and jars of various substances. "We begin today," he announced without turning, apparently aware of her presence. "The soil testing comes first. Then we'll determine exactly what each field needs." "Soil testing?" Eleanor descended the stairs, joining him in the crisp morning air. "Indeed, every plot of land tells a story: what it lacks, what it has too much of, what it's ready to grow." Roland handed her a small spade. "Would you care to learn?" What followed was Eleanor's first true lesson in Roland's revolutionary methods. They visited each major field on the estate, taking soil samples, noting drainage patterns, and discussing the history of what had been planted where. Roland's men worked with practiced efficiency, clearly having performed these rituals many times before. "Now comes the art," Roland explained, as they returned to the great hall, where long tables awaited their samples. "We'll test each soil's qualities and determine how to restore balance." The process was meticulous. Roland introduced her to the concept of soil pH, explaining how different crops thrived in different conditions. He showed her how certain plants could indicate soil health, while others could improve it. "This clover," he held up a handful of seeds, "fixes nitrogen in the soil. Plant it this season, work it under before planting grain next year, and you'll see the difference." Eleanor found herself drawn into the science of it all. By mid-morning, she was helping to categorize samples, taking notes in her careful script as Roland dictated his findings. The work was tedious but purposeful, each detail building toward a larger picture of agricultural transformation. When the estate's steward, Master William, entered to announce visitors, he found his mistress kneeling beside her new husband, both of them elbow-deep in soil samples. "My lady, Lord Crawford has arrived," William announced with visible disapproval. Their neighbor was known for traditional methods and skepticism toward innovation. Roland immediately began organizing the samples, his expression hardening. "We'll continue this later. I should not be the one to greet your guests on this matter." "No," Eleanor decided firmly. "We'll face this together. You promised partnership, remember?" Lord Crawford's surprise upon entering their makeshift laboratory was palpable. A portly man with a red face and loud voice, he took in the scene with growing disapproval. "Lady Eleanor, or should I say Lady Blackwood now, what strange practices have taken over your manor?" Eleanor rose gracefully, soil still clinging to her dress. "Sir Roland is introducing modern agricultural methods to help recover our lands. Methods that have proven successful on his own estate." Crawford sneered openly at Roland. "Methods learned in foreign lands, no doubt. Have you considered that English soil requires English traditions? English soil requires understanding, not nationality," Roland replied evenly, though Eleanor noticed the tension in his jaw. "Your own estate borders mine. Have you not observed the difference in our yields?" "I've observed your rejection of proper ways," Crawford retorted, "and now you've infected the Thompsons with your strange ideas." "Mark, My words, this will end in disaster. After Crawford's departure, an uncomfortable silence settled over the workspace. Roland began putting away samples with jerky movements, clearly agitated. "Don't let him disturb you," Eleanor soothed, helping to organize materials. "He's threatened. By change. We've always known there would be resistance." "It's not just his words," Roland admitted. "It's knowing that every failure will be blamed on my methods, while every success will be credited to divine intervention or traditional wisdom." Eleanor paused in her work, struck by the burden her husband carried. "Then we must ensure our successes outweigh our failures so dramatically that even the most stubborn cannot deny them." A genuine smile, the first she'd seen from him, transformed Roland's stern features. "You're more formidable than I initially assessed, Lady Eleanor." "And you're more vulnerable than you pretend, Sir Roland," she replied softly. "But perhaps that's what we both need. Someone who sees beyond the masks we wear." As the sun reached its zenith, they returned to their work with renewed purpose. The foundation of their partnership, both personal and professional, was being laid grain by grain, sample by sample. Neither could foresee the challenges that would test their resolve, nor the discoveries that would transform not just their estate, but their understanding of each other. What had begun as a desperate alliance was slowly evolving into something neither had expected, a meeting of minds dedicated to a common cause. The gruff knight and the practical lady had found common ground in the ancient wisdom of the earth itself. Their success or failure would rest not just on soil science, but on their ability to trust each other with secrets both agricultural and personal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As summer progressed, Eleanor found herself rising before dawn each day to join Roland in the fields. The agricultural work had evolved into an intensive education, with Eleanor absorbing knowledge that challenged everything she'd learned about estate management from her tutors. "Look here," Roland said one misty morning, plunging his fingers into recently turned soil. "Feel the texture, the dampness. This field has been cropped too intensively without proper rest. We'll need to rotate." "In 3 phases." Eleanor knelt beside him, her morning dress already stained with earth. The intimate act of touching the same soil created an unexpected connection between them. "How did you learn to read the land like this?" "Years of observation in lands where one mistake meant famine," Roland replied quietly. "In the Holy Lands, I met farmers who could predict the coming season by tasting the soil. Here, we've forgotten to listen." Their daily routine had fallen into a pattern. Mornings were spent in the fields, afternoons in Roland's study, reviewing ancient texts he'd brought from his travels. The room had been transformed into a library of agricultural wisdom, with scrolls and manuscripts treating farming as both science and art. "These are texts from the Iberian farmlands," Roland explained, spreading out carefully preserved parchments covered in detailed illustrations. "They document irrigation methods that can double yields in dry seasons." His finger traced diagrams, showing water channels and crop placement. Here, they understood that water flows and plant roots form a conversation beneath the soil. Eleanor studied the unfamiliar script. Why haven't English farmers adopted these techniques? "Fear," Roland said simply, "and pride. When knowledge challenges tradition, tradition often wins, even when it leads to starvation." Their evenings were spent in the solar, where Roland shared stories of agricultural innovations he'd witnessed. Terraced hillsides in distant lands that prevented erosion, moon-phase planting that optimized growth cycles, and the use of natural predators to control crop-eating insects. In the east, they use certain flowers to attract beneficial beetles, he explained, sketching quick diagrams. "These beetles feed on the pests that destroy grain crops, nature's balance, established through understanding rather than combat." One particularly warm evening, Eleanor found Roland on the castle walls, staring at their expanding lands with an expression she couldn't read. She approached quietly, offering him one of the iced fruit concoctions their cook had started making to combat the heat. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked, using a phrase that had become familiar between them. Roland accepted the drink with a nod of thanks. "I was thinking about my father," he admitted unexpectedly. "He'd call all this nonsense. The old ways were good enough for our fathers," he'd say. "Yet you pursued new knowledge anyway." "I had no choice." Roland's voice grew distant. "The old ways killed our serfs with hunger while we feasted. I couldn't bear the guilt." He turned to face her. "That's why I left for the wars, thinking I could earn wealth to feed them. Instead, I found something more valuable than gold." Eleanor set down her glass, sensing he was about to share something significant. "What did you find?" "The understanding that wealth isn't measured in coins, but in the prosperity of those who depend on you." Roland gestured toward the village below, where lamplights were beginning to appear in windows. "Every family down there represents a sacred trust. Their fate depends on our decisions." His words struck Eleanor deeply. This was the philosophy that had driven her acceptance of their marriage, though she hadn't articulated it so clearly. "Then, we're well matched in our burdens," she said softly. The moment of vulnerability passed quickly as Roland returned to his characteristic efficiency. "Tomorrow, we begin implementing the wider planting strategies. I've selected our most progressive farmers to learn the new methods first. The others will follow when they see success." Eleanor had indeed noticed the subtle divisions among their workers. Some embraced Roland's innovations eagerly, particularly the younger ones, while others maintained suspicious distance. The estate, Carpenter Master Thomas, had become Roland's closest ally, helping to construct the new irrigation tools and planting frames. "Master Thomas understands craftsmanship," Roland had explained earlier. "He sees the engineering principles behind what we do." His support has been invaluable. However, not all responses were positive. During the weekly market day, Eleanor overheard troubling whispers among the vendor women. "Unnatural, isn't it? The way crops are growing in this heat," one muttered. "Sir, Roland's foreign ways," another agreed. "Mark my words, no good will come of it." Eleanor's initial instinct was to correct them, to explain the science behind the improvements, but she remembered Roland's warning about changing minds through demonstration rather than debate. "The proof," he'd said, "lives in the harvest." As summer wore on, the transformations became undeniable. Fields that had shown early signs of stress under traditional methods now flourished. The irrigation channels Roland had designed carried water efficiently even during dry spells. Companion plants created natural barriers against pests, reducing crop loss significantly. One morning, while examining a particularly successful wheat field, Eleanor noticed something remarkable. The grains were fuller, more abundant than anything she'd seen in years of managing the estate. "This is extraordinary," she breathed, running her fingers through the heavy stalks. "How much yield increase should we expect?" Roland's response was cautious. "If we maintain current conditions, possibly 30% above previous records." But, Eleanor prompted. "Success breeds resistance," Roland warned. "Not everyone welcomes improvement. Some fear what they don't understand." His words proved prophetic. That afternoon, Father Benedict arrived at their gate, his usually serene face creased with concern. Eleanor received him in the solar, where Roland joined them after finishing his morning rounds. "My lady, Sir Roland," the elderly priest began hesitantly, "I come with troubling reports. There are those who claim your agricultural methods border on ungodly practices." "Which practices specifically concern them, Father?" Roland asked, his tone respectful but firm. The planting by moon phases, the use of certain herbs between crops, the mixing of different plants. Father Benedict's voice trailed off. Some say these things meddle with God's natural order. Eleanor felt anger rising but controlled it carefully. Father, surely God blessed us with minds to understand his creation better. We use no witchcraft, only observation and knowledge. Roland supported her argument with scholarly precision. The methods I apply have been documented by learned men for centuries. Many were first recorded by monks who sought to better provide for their communities. Father Benedict seemed relieved by this connection to religious scholarship. After further discussion and Roland's promise to explain any specific technique that raised concerns, the priest departed somewhat mollified. But the encounter left both Eleanor and Roland uneasy. Opposition will grow as our success becomes more apparent, Roland predicted that evening as they reviewed the day's work. We must be prepared to defend our methods with more than facts. How do we defend against superstition? Eleanor asked, frustration evident in her voice. Roland set down his quill thoughtfully. We tell stories. We make our successes human and relatable. People fear the unfamiliar until they understand its benefits touch their own lives. This wisdom proved valuable when, weeks later, a crisis arose that would test both their methods and their standing in the community. A sudden blight appeared in the barley fields, a fungal infection that could devastate the entire crop if not addressed immediately. Eleanor woke before dawn to find Roland already dressed and preparing to leave the northeastern field, he explained shortly. The humidity we've had has created perfect conditions for fungal spread. We must act now. They rode out together as the sun rose, finding several workers already assembled. The affected area was larger than Eleanor had feared, a spreading darkness that threatened to engulf the entire field. Traditional methods would have us burn the infected area, noted Master William, their head farmer, create a barrier, and lose perhaps a third of our crop, Roland countered. He dismounted, examining the affected plants closely. This particular blight responds to specific interventions. He withdrew a pouch from his saddlebag. We'll need to create a solution using these herbs. The plants must be treated at the root. Eleanor watched as Roland directed the creation of a natural fungicide, mixing crushed herbs with water according to precise measurements. The workers, many still skeptical of foreign methods, watched with barely concealed doubt. "This will never work," murmured one. "We should burn now before it spreads further." Eleanor found herself defending Roland's approach. "Master William, we've seen his methods succeed throughout the season. Surely we owe them fair trial when the alternative is certain loss." The application of the treatment took most of the day, with Roland and Eleanor working alongside their people. Eleanor's hands grew blistered from the repetitive work, her dress thoroughly ruined, but she persisted. She could feel the significance of this moment. Their success or failure here would determine how their methods were viewed by the entire estate. As evening approached and they returned to the manor, both were exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "How? Long before we know if the treatment works?" Eleanor asked as they prepared for a late supper. 3 days, Roland replied, flexing his own aching hands. "By then, we'll see either containment or complete loss." Those 3 days stretched endlessly. Eleanor found herself visiting the field multiple times daily, Roland beside her as they monitored the blight's progress. Their people, both supporters and skeptics, made similar pilgrimages, creating an atmosphere of tense anticipation throughout the estate. On the 3rd morning, Eleanor woke to find Roland's side of the bed empty and cold. She dressed hurriedly and found him already mounted, ready to ride out. "Come," was all he said, but something in his expression made her heart leap. At the field, a small crowd had already gathered. As they approached, Eleanor saw what had drawn them. The blight spread had stopped. The treated plants showed signs of recovery. new growth emerging where death had threatened. "It worked," Master William said quietly, amazement clear in his weathered face. "The blight has retreated." Relief and triumph swept through Eleanor, but she noticed Roland's muted reaction. When they returned home and were alone, she questioned his restraint. "This is a tremendous success. Why aren't you celebrating?" Roland moved to the window, his profile outlined against the morning light. "Because success brings its own dangers. Those who feared our methods will now fear our knowledge. Envy breeds differently than superstition, but it breeds nonetheless." His words proved prescient. Within days, Lord Crawford arrived unannounced, accompanied by several neighbouring landowners. They found Eleanor and Roland in the study, poring over harvest projections. "Remarkable results you're achieving," Crawford began without preamble. "Enough to make one's neighbours concerned." "Our success helps all the region," Eleanor responded carefully. "Improved yields mean more stable food supplies for everyone. Or," Crawford suggested, "a dangerous monopoly of knowledge. Tell me, Sir Roland, do you intend to share these miraculous methods with fellow gentlemen?" Roland raised an eyebrow. "I share with any who treat the land with respect and their people with fairness." "And who judges these qualifications?" Crawford pressed. "You." The conversation continued in circles, with the visiting lords expressing concerns about precedent, tradition, and the social order. After they departed, Eleanor found herself both angry and apprehensive. "They fear our success will make them look incompetent," she observed. "Worse," Roland corrected, "they fear it will give their own people ideas about what's possible. Improved conditions lead to expectations of continued improvement." As summer transitioned to early autumn, the tension between their growing success and mounting opposition created constant undercurrent to their work. Yet through it all, Eleanor began noticing subtle changes in her relationship with Roland. The partnership they'd agreed to was evolving into something more complex. She observed his gentleness with struggling plants, even as he commanded men in battle-hardened tones. She saw the passion beneath his gruff exterior when he discussed soil, composition, or seed selection. More significantly, she witnessed his growing ease in her presence, moments when the warrior's mask slipped entirely, revealing the dedicated scholar and, occasionally, the lonely man within. One evening, after a successful day implementing new grain storage techniques, they sat together on the manor steps. The setting sun painted the landscape in golden hues, and for the first time, comfortable silence fell between them. "I never expected this," Eleanor admitted finally. "The work, the conflict, the partnership." Roland glanced at her, something unguarded in his expression. "Nor did I. When I proposed this alliance, I thought only of combining resources and knowledge. I didn't anticipate finding a true partner in the endeavor." The confession hung between them, weighted with possibility. Eleanor felt her heart respond in ways that had nothing to do with practical considerations or family obligations. She was beginning to see Roland not just as her husband or agricultural mentor, but as a man worthy of respect and perhaps something deeper. "We should prepare for tomorrow's council meeting," Roland said, breaking the moment, but not its lingering resonance. "Several estate holders have requested a demonstration of our methods. If we can convince them, we'll change everything," Eleanor finished, understanding both the opportunity and the responsibility it represented. As they returned inside to plan their strategy, Eleanor realized that their battle was no longer just about saving her family's estate. It had become about proving that knowledge and innovation could triumph over tradition and fear, that understanding the earth could lead to prosperity for all who worked it. The seeds Roland had brought, both literal and metaphorical, were taking root in ways neither had anticipated. Their success would depend not just on agricultural science, but on their ability to navigate the complex web of politics, superstition, and human nature that surrounded them. Most importantly, it would rest on the growing foundation of trust and potential affection developing between them. What had begun as a strategic marriage was blossoming into something neither had sought, but both were beginning to recognize might be exactly what they needed. A true partnership capable of weathering both the challenges of the soil and the complexities of the heart. The harvest season arrived with golden abundance that surpassed even Roland's careful projections. Fields that had once yielded barely enough to sustain the estate now produced surpluses that filled the granaries to capacity. The Thompson lands, now technically Blackwood lands through marriage, had transformed from the brink of ruin to remarkable prosperity in a single growing cycle. Eleanor stood beside Roland at the edge of the northern wheat field, watching the workers bring in the final sheaves. The atmosphere among the harvesters was jubilant, their movements energized despite days of demanding labor. "They know what this means," Roland observed quietly. "Security through winter. Seed for next year. Surplus to trade." Eleanor studied her husband's profile, noting the rare contentment softening his usually stern features. "You've given them more than food," she replied. "You've given them hope." "We," Roland corrected, turning to meet her gaze. "This success belongs to both of us. Your understanding of these people, their concerns and traditions, has made implementation impossible where I would have encountered only resistance." The acknowledgement warmed Eleanor more deeply than she expected. Their partnership had evolved beyond formal arrangement into genuine collaboration. Roland's agricultural knowledge combined with her diplomatic skills had created something neither could have achieved alone. "The harvest festival will be different this year," Eleanor mused as they walked the perimeter of the field. "For the first time in years, we'll celebrate true abundance rather than merely surviving another season." "Your people have earned celebration," Roland agreed, "as have you." The harvest festival traditionally marked the transition from growing season to the quieter winter months. Eleanor had maintained the tradition even during lean years, understanding its importance for community morale. This year, however, the preparations took on new significance. "We should invite neighboring estates," Eleanor suggested during their evening planning session. "Show them our methods in practice, rather than merely describing them." Roland paused in his record-keeping, a familiar wariness crossing his features. "You believe Lord Crawford and his allies will be receptive?" "Not initially," Eleanor admitted. "But seeing the abundance firsthand may overcome skepticism where words cannot." She reached for the estate records. "Look at these numbers, Roland. Our yields have doubled in certain fields. Facts this compelling deserve audience." After consideration, Roland nodded. "A demonstration, then. But we should prepare carefully for the questions and accusations that will follow." Invitations were dispatched to neighboring manors and villages. The response was mixed but significant. Curiosity overwhelmed suspicion for many landholders, while others claimed prior commitments. Notably, Lord Crawford agreed to attend, bringing several influential associates. Preparation consumed the estate. Eleanor oversaw the traditional aspects, music, food, ceremonial arrangements, while Roland organized agricultural displays demonstrating their innovative methods. Together, they created illustrated manuscripts explaining key techniques, simple enough for practical application without revealing the most sophisticated aspects of Roland's knowledge. "A balance," Roland explained as they reviewed the materials. "Share enough to improve conditions broadly without surrendering the competitive advantages that will protect this estate's future." The day before the festival, Roland received concerning news from the northern borders of their land. A dispute had arisen between their shepherds and a neighboring estate's men regarding grazing rights. Though reluctant to leave on the eve of their important demonstration, Roland determined the situation required his personal attention. "This timing is suspicious," he confided to Eleanor as he prepared to depart. "Lord Harrington has never contested those boundaries before." "Perhaps he wishes to test our resolve," Eleanor suggested, "or simply to separate us before tomorrow's gathering." Roland's expression darkened. "Either way, I must address it. These strategic games could escalate without proper response." He hesitated, then added, "The demonstration tomorrow falls to you. You understand the methods well enough to explain them, and you speak their language better than I ever will." Eleanor felt both honored by his trust and apprehensive about the responsibility. "I'll not squander this opportunity," she promised. Roland's departure left Eleanor solely responsible for final preparations. She worked late into the night with Master William and the estate steward, ensuring all was ready for the crucial demonstration. The tension building throughout the region regarding their methods made success all the more essential. The harvest festival dawned bright and clear. Eleanor dressed carefully in her finest gown of deep crimson wool, adorned with subtle embroidery, rather than ostentatious decoration. The color spoke of authority without intimidation, and the practical fabric reflected the estate's values of functional elegance. Villagers began arriving at mid-morning, their holiday attire brightening the estate grounds. Traditional musicians established themselves near the great oak that centered the celebration area, while food tables groaned under the weight of harvest bounty, bread from estate wheat, vegetables from the experimental gardens, meats from herds that had benefited from improved pasture management. The neighboring lords arrived shortly before noon, a procession of horses and formal attire. Eleanor greeted them with practiced grace, though she noted the calculating assessment behind their courtesies. Lord Crawford, especially, examined the preparations with barely concealed skepticism. "Quite the display, Lady Blackwood," he commented, deliberately using her married title rather than her familiar family name. "One might almost believe your estate had never known hardship." "Hardship teaches valuable lessons when we're willing to learn them," Eleanor replied evenly. "Please, enjoy the celebration. The agricultural demonstration begins after the midday meal." The formal feast proceeded according to tradition, with ceremonial breaking of harvest bread and offerings of first fruits. Eleanor presided from the high table, acutely aware of Roland's empty seat beside her. The visiting nobles made pointed inquiries about his absence, which she addressed with diplomatic precision. "Sir Roland attends to an urgent boundary matter," she explained. "He sends his regrets and anticipates joining us by evening." "Convenient," Lord Crawford murmured to his companion, deliberately audible, "absent when proof of his methods is demanded." Eleanor ignored the provocation, maintaining focus on the larger purpose of the gathering. As the meal concluded, she led the assembled guests toward the prepared demonstration area at the edge of the central fields. Here, Roland had arranged for sample plots showing various stages of their agricultural innovations. Tables displayed the specialized tools they had developed alongside soil samples and seed varieties. Diagrams illustrated irrigation systems and crop rotation sequences. Eleanor began the presentation with confidence born of months working alongside Roland in these very fields. Her hands, once accustomed only to needlework and household ledgers, now moved with authority as she demonstrated soil testing techniques and explained the principles behind companion planting. "The key insight," she explained to the gathering, crowd, "is understanding that plants communicate beneath the soil through root systems and chemical exchanges. Some combinations strengthen each other, while others compete destructively. She demonstrated using samples of symbiotic plantings, beans that enriched soil for subsequent grain crops, herbs that deterred pests naturally without depleting resources. The villagers listened with growing interest, particularly when she connected abstract principles to practical results. This field, she indicated a section visible from their position, produced 40% more wheat this season using these methods, with seed that requires less flourishment to thrive. The visit nobles listened with expressions ranging from skepticism to reluctant interest. Lord Crawford, however, seemed determined to undermine the presentation. "Impressive claims," he interjected after Eleanor explained their irrigation innovations. "Yet I wonder how these foreign techniques will fare under English conditions over multiple seasons. One fortunate summer doesn't establish pattern." A valid concern," Eleanor acknowledged, refusing to be provoked, "which is why we've documented results from Sir Roland's original estate, where these methods have succeeded for 5 consecutive years across varying weather conditions." She directed their attention to the record books, where meticulous documentation showed yield improvements across multiple growing cycles. The evidence was compelling even to skeptical observers, particularly the practical farmers among the audience. The demonstration continued. Eleanor detected subtle shifts in the atmosphere. The villagers, initially divided between tradition and innovation, increasingly engaged with genuine interest. Several tenant farmers asked specific questions about implementation techniques, clearly considering practical application to their own plots. Even among the nobility, certain younger lords showed growing curiosity, particularly regarding cost efficiency and labor reduction aspects. Only Crawford and his closest allies maintained rigid opposition, their questions becoming increasingly confrontational. "These methods require significant initial investment," Crawford pointed out sharply, "resources that modest estates cannot spare." "The initial investment returns threefold within 2 growing seasons," Eleanor countered, "and many techniques can be implemented gradually, building upon success rather than requiring complete transformation." The debate might have continued productively had Crawford not changed tactics, abandoning agricultural critique for personal attack. "I wonder," he said loudly, ensuring the entire gathering could hear, "how a delicate lady with no agricultural training became such an expert in foreign farming methods. Perhaps Sir Roland's mysterious knowledge includes unusual powers of persuasion." The implication hung in the air, ugly and deliberate. A hushed tension fell over the gathering, the festive atmosphere suddenly charged with discomfort. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm, but maintained her composure, years of noble training asserting themselves in crisis. Before she could formulate appropriate response, an unexpected voice rose from the crowd. "I've worked these lands for 40 years, announced Master William, the elderly head farmer stepping forward with dignity that belied his common birth. "Served Lord Thompson faithfully before Lady Eleanor was born. Never in all my seasons have I seen crops flourish as they have under these new methods." He faced Crawford directly, his weathered features set with determination. "The lady's knowledge comes from dedicated study alongside Sir Roland. I've witnessed her rise before dawn, to test soils and tend experimental plots with her own hands. Her understanding isn't sorcery or foreign manipulation. It's earned through labor and intelligence." A murmur of agreement rose from the estate workers. Several other long-serving staff stepped forward, each offering testimony to Eleanor's direct involvement in the agricultural transformation. Their unplanned defense carried weight that Eleanor's own words could not have achieved. Crawford seemed momentarily taken aback by this unexpected resistance. Before he could regroup, fate intervened, in the form of approaching horses. Roland had returned, accompanied by several of his men, dust from the road still clinging to their travel clothes. Eleanor felt relief surge through her at his timely arrival. Roland dismounted smoothly despite his travel-worn appearance. Immediately, reading the tension in the gathering, he joined Eleanor at the demonstration table, a subtle touch to her elbow, communicating both support and inquiry. "You've returned just in time," she murmured. "Lord Crawford questions not only our methods, but the nature of our partnership." Understanding flashed in Roland's eyes, followed by a hardness Eleanor had rarely seen since their early days together. He faced the assembly with the commanding presence that had once led men into battle. "I understand questions have been raised regarding our agricultural innovations," he stated, voice carrying easily across the gathering. "Questions are appropriate when confronting new concepts. I welcome them." His gaze fixed on Crawford. "However, I cannot welcome disrespect toward my wife, whose contributions to this estate's transformation equal my own." The direct confrontation created momentary discomfort among the noble guests, unused to such blunt address in social settings. Crawford, however, seemed determined to maintain his position. "We merely question the wisdom of abandoning traditions that have sustained English estates for generations in favor of foreign methods," he replied stiffly, "and the unusual enthusiasm with which Lady Eleanor has embraced these changes." "Perhaps," Roland suggested with dangerous mildness, "you might direct your attention to the evidence before you." He gestured toward the harvest records, the flourishing fields visible beyond the demonstration area, the abundance displayed on the festival tables. "Results speak more truthfully than speculation." The tension might have escalated further had Eleanor not intervened with diplomatic precision. "Gentlemen, this gathering celebrates successful harvest, not confrontation. Lord Crawford raises valid concerns about tradition and preservation. These values remain important even as we explore improvements." She moved to the display table, drawing attention back to the agricultural demonstration. "Our goal has never been to replace English farming traditions entirely, but to enhance them with compatible knowledge. Many of these techniques actually revive ancient practices forgotten over generations." This reframing shifted the conversation subtly but significantly. By positioning their innovations as restoration rather than foreign imposition, Eleanor created bridge between tradition and change that many present found easier to cross. The demonstration concluded with practical invitation. "We welcome any interested parties to send representatives to observe our methods more closely," Eleanor offered. "Knowledge improves with sharing and testing." Several of the younger lords immediately expressed interest, along with tenant farmers, eager to improve their own modest holdings. Even some of Crawford's allies seemed torn between loyalty to his position and practical interest in techniques that promised improved yields. As the formal presentation transitioned back to festival celebrations, Roland drew Eleanor aside, finding momentary privacy beneath the estate's ancient oak tree. "You managed the situation masterfully," he acknowledged, genuine admiration in his voice. Crawford came seeking confrontation and found himself facing unified defense instead. "Our people stood with us," Eleanor replied, still moved by their unexpected support. "That matters more than nobility's approval." Roland studied her with uncharacteristic openness. "When I rode out yesterday, I worried about leaving you to face this challenge alone. I should have known better." His hand found hers, the gesture private despite the surrounding celebration. "You've become more than partner in this venture, Eleanor. You've become its heart." The declaration hung between them, weighted with meaning. Beyond mere professional appreciation, Eleanor felt the familiar barriers between them thinning, the careful distance they had maintained from personal entanglement eroding beneath growing mutual respect. "The boundary dispute," she asked, "practical." matters providing safer ground than emotional terrain, neither yet knew how to navigate. Resolved, for now, Roland replied, accepting her redirection, though I suspect it was manufactured specifically to separate us before today's demonstration. Crawford has allies beyond those who attended. Their opposition grows as our success increases, Eleanor noted. Exactly as you predicted. Roland nodded grimly. Today was opening skirmish in longer campaign. We've won this encounter, but they'll regroup with different strategies. He gazed across the celebration, where estate workers danced alongside neighboring farmers, the traditional harvest festivities resuming their joyful course. Yet we've also gained allies, Eleanor observed. Those who recognize the potential benefits outweigh attachment to tradition. Progress always advances this way, Roland agreed, not through sudden revolution, but gradual conversion of practical minds. He turned back to her, something unguarded in his expression. We should rejoin our guests. But first, to Eleanor's surprise, he reached into his travel pouch and withdrew a small object wrapped in cloth. I found this during our soil surveying last month. I've been waiting for the right moment. The unwrapped cloth revealed a delicate brooch, clearly ancient, its bronze surface bearing intricate knotwork pattern. Roman craftsmanship, Roland explained, buried for centuries until our new ploughing methods revealed it. Eleanor accepted the unexpected gift with genuine wonder. It's beautiful, a symbol, Roland said quietly, of how looking forward sometimes reveals treasures from the past. His normally stern features softened as he added, like this partnership that began as practical alliance and has become something neither of us anticipated. Before Eleanor could respond to this unprecedented personal revelation, they were interrupted by the steward announcing the traditional harvest dance was beginning. The moment of connection paused, but not broken. They returned to their duties as lord and lady of the estate. Eleanor wore the ancient brooch proudly as she led the opening harvest dance with Roland. The weight of it against her gown reminded her of unexpected depths beneath her husband's warrior exterior. The scholar, the innovator, and perhaps something more personal gradually revealing itself through shared purpose and growing trust. The day's conflicts and triumphs had demonstrated both the success of their agricultural methods and the strength of their evolving partnership. Challenges clearly lay ahead as opposition organized against their innovations, but they faced these prospects with increasing confidence in their shared vision and developing bond. What had begun as desperate alliance was transforming into something neither had sought, but both were beginning to value beyond its practical benefits: connection based on mutual respect, shared purpose, and emerging affection that transcended their original contractual arrangement. Autumn's golden bounty gave way to winter's silver stillness. The estate settled into the quieter rhythms of the cold season, fields resting beneath frost while indoor work occupied the household. For Eleanor and Roland, this first winter of their marriage brought unexpected opportunity for discovery beyond agricultural innovation. The great hall had been transformed into winter workshop, with long tables hosting various projects. Roland had introduced the concept of productive winter months, rather than mere endurance of the cold, a radical notion in itself for many estate workers accustomed to hibernation-like existence until spring. In Damascus, Roland explained one snowy morning as they reviewed the workshop activities. Winter markets thrive with goods produced during cold months. Time for repair, creation, and preparation rather than stagnation. Eleanor moved among the tables, observing women spinning new wool techniques Roland had introduced, men crafting improved tools for spring planting, and children learning practical mathematics through measuring and design activities. The atmosphere hummed with purposeful energy despite the hostile weather beyond the manor walls. My father always viewed winter as necessary burden, Eleanor noted, joining Roland by the central hearth. Empty months to be endured until productive seasons returned. Most English lords share that perspective, Roland agreed, warming his hands by the fire, failing to recognize winter's value for reflection, planning, and improvement. Their conversation paused as Master Thomas, the estate carpenter, approached with hesitant determination. He carried what appeared to be modified spinning wheel, its design altered in several significant ways. "Begging your pardon, Sir Roland, Lady Eleanor," he began, setting the device before them. "I've been thinking on what you explained about the Eastern spinning methods, made some adjustments that might improve wool processing further." Roland examined the modified wheel with genuine interest, asking specific questions about the mechanism and materials used. Eleanor watched their interaction with quiet satisfaction, noting how differently Roland engaged with their people compared to her father or neighboring lords. He treated each innovation with sincere consideration, regardless of its source, valuing practical knowledge over hierarchical status. "This shows promise," Roland finally declared, turning the wheel experimentally. "The tension adjustment particularly. We should test it alongside existing models to compare output." Master Thomas straightened with evident pride. "Ready whenever you are, my lord." After the carpenter departed, Eleanor observed, 6 months ago, he would never have approached the lord of the manor with unsolicited design. You've changed how they view their own capabilities." Roland seemed momentarily surprised by this assessment. "I've merely recognized value where others ignored it. These people have always possessed intelligence and skill. They simply lacked permission to apply it beyond prescribed boundaries." "Boundaries you've systematically dismantled," Eleanor pointed out, "creating environment where innovation flows from unexpected sources." Something in Roland's expression shifted, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. "Perhaps because I understand what it means to be judged only by position, rather than potential." His hand moved unconsciously to the scarring visible at his collar. "Battle wounds identified me solely as warrior, my scholarly interest dismissed as inappropriate distraction from martial duties." The personal admission created momentary intimacy amid the busy hall. Eleanor had grown accustomed to Roland's gradual revelations, these glimpses beneath the armor he had worn since their first meeting. Each disclosure revealed more of the complex man hidden behind the gruff knight's exterior. Their conversation pivoted as the estate steward approached, with correspondence that had arrived despite the snowy roads. Eleanor sorted through the various messages, supply confirmations, minor local disputes requiring mediation, and finally, heavy parchment bearing the royal seal. "From the King's Council," she noted with surprise, breaking the wax seal carefully. Roland watched her expression as she read, noting the subtle tension that appeared at the corners of her mouth. "Unpleasant news. Complicated news," Eleanor replied, folding the message carefully. "The Royal Agricultural Advisor has heard reports of our methods and requests comprehensive documentation for review by Spring Council." "That could be opportunity or threat," Roland observed, analytical mind immediately assessing implications. "Royal endorsement would protect us from Crawford's continued opposition, but suspicious examination could create new challenges." "There's more," Eleanor continued. "The message mentions that Lord Crawford has raised concerns about foreign practices being introduced to English soil without proper oversight. He's positioned himself as defender of traditional agricultural methods." Predictable, Roland's expression hardened. He seeks to undermine through political channels what he couldn't challenge through practical results. The royal request required careful response. Over the following days, Roland and Eleanor worked to compile documentation of their methods. They created illustrated manuscripts explaining key innovations, supported by detailed harvest records, demonstrating improved yields. The work revealed how thoroughly Eleanor had absorbed Roland's knowledge. She could now articulate complex agricultural concepts with confidence equal to his own. "We should emphasize historical continuity," Eleanor suggested as they refined their presentation. "Show how many techniques actually revive ancient Roman practices once common in England." Roland agreed, adding historical references from manuscripts he had collected during his travels. Connection to England's past will ease concerns about foreign influence. Beyond this official response, their daily life settled into winter rhythm that brought unexpected personal discoveries. With less demanding field work, they found more time for conversation beyond agricultural planning. Eleanor discovered Roland's interest in astronomy, while he learned of her talent for music that had been neglected amid estate responsibilities. "My mother taught me," Eleanor explained one evening when Roland found her playing the estate's old lute. She believed beauty held practical value even amid necessity. "She was wise," Roland replied, listening with evident appreciation. "The soul requires nourishment as surely as the body." These quieter moments revealed dimensions of compatibility neither had anticipated in their practical arrangement. They discovered shared appreciation for historical scholarship, complementary approaches to problem-solving, and unexpected harmony in their vision for the estate's future. One particularly bitter January night, with snow piling against the manor, walls and wind howling through bare tree branches, they sat before the solar fire, reviewing seed inventory for spring planting. The conversation had drifted from agricultural planning to broader philosophical questions about land stewardship. "The fundamental error in English farming," Roland explained, sketching soil profiles on a slate board, "is viewing land as something to be conquered rather than partnership to be cultivated. Yet you were a warrior before becoming agricultural innovator," Eleanor observed. "How did conquest give way to cultivation in your own thinking?" Roland set down the chalk, consideration evident in his expression. "Through failure," he admitted finally. "I believed strength demonstrated through dominance over enemies, over land, over circumstances, until I encountered problems no amount of force could overcome." "The Eastern campaigns?" "Partly," Roland acknowledged. "But more fundamentally, watching my own lands suffer under traditional methods despite every advantage of resources and position. Strength proved irrelevant against failing soil and changing climate." He gazed into the fire, reflection deepening. His voice, "I had to learn different kind of power, the strength that comes from understanding rather than overcoming." Eleanor recognized the rare moment of personal revelation. That transformation couldn't have been easy for someone trained from childhood for command and conquest. "It wasn't," Roland agreed simply. "Pride resists adaptation, particularly when identity has been built on specific conception of strength." The firelight cast flickering shadows across his scarred features, highlighting both the warrior he had been and the scholar he had become. Eleanor found herself studying him with new perspective, appreciating the extraordinary journey that had brought him from battlefield to farmland, from commanding men to understanding soil. "Is that why you agreed to this marriage?" she asked, carefully. "Recognizing opportunity to apply your knowledge more broadly?" Roland's gaze shifted from the fire to her face, a different warmth in his expression. "Initially, yes. Your estate represented ideal conditions for implementing methods, already proven on my own lands." He hesitated, then added with uncharacteristic gentleness, "But I've discovered unanticipated benefits beyond agricultural opportunity." The statement hung between them, its implications both clear and carefully bounded. They had progressed from arranged marriage to working partnership to something less easily defined. Mutual respect layered with growing personal connection neither had sought, but both increasingly valued. Before Eleanor could respond, a sharp knock interrupted the moment. Thomas, the night watchman, entered with urgency rarely seen in the disciplined. "Staff, begging your pardon, my lord, my lady," he began breathlessly. "Riders approaching from the North Road. Not expected visitors given the hour and weather." Roland was immediately alert, the warrior's instincts never far beneath the surface. "How many? Can you identify their colors?" "At least 6, possibly more, hidden by the snow. No colors visible, but they ride like men with purpose despite the storm." Eleanor exchanged concerned glance with Roland. Unexpected nighttime visitors. During winter storm, suggested urgent circumstances, perhaps neighboring estate in trouble, or messengers with critical news that couldn't wait for morning. "Prepare the great hall," she instructed the watchman. "Have kitchen staff heat broth and bread for cold travelers." "And alert Devon and Richard," Roland added, naming his most trusted men. No need for visible weaponry, but prudent readiness, given the unusual timing. As Thomas departed to implement these instructions, Roland moved to the cabinet where he kept personal weapons, not battle armaments, but sufficient protection for uncertain situations. He buckled on a simple sword belt beneath his heavy winter robe. "Precaution," he explained, noting Eleanor's observation. "Winter desperation sometimes drives men to unfortunate decisions." They descended together to the great hall, arriving just as the outer gates signaled the visitors' approach. Eleanor arranged herself near the main hearth, creating impression of casual evening interrupted rather than defensive preparation. Roland positioned himself seemingly relaxed, but strategically placed to respond to potential threats. The manor. Doors opened, admitting swirl of snowflakes and 6 frost-covered riders whose appearance immediately dispelled concerns about brigands or desperate peasants. These men wore quality garments beneath their travel cloaks, and their demeanor suggested authority rather than aggression. Their leader stepped forward, pushing back his snow-covered hood to reveal a face Eleanor recognized with shock. Sir Marcus Fletcher, the King's agricultural commissioner himself, whose presence had been requested for spring council, not midwinter inspection. "Sir Roland Blackwood, Lady Eleanor," Fletcher announced formally, despite the unusual circumstances. "I apologize for our unexpected arrival. Weather forced us to seek shelter, and your estate was nearest viable haven. You're welcome to our hospitality," Eleanor responded automatically, courtly training engaging despite her surprise. Roland stepped forward with similar composure. "Your timing is unexpected but not unwelcome. We've been preparing documentation of our methods for your spring review." Fletcher exchanged meaningful glances with his companions before responding. "The council deemed this matter sufficiently important to warrant immediate assessment rather than waiting for spring deliberations." "At Crawford's urging, no doubt," Roland observed with dangerous mildness. "Fletcher neither confirmed nor denied this assessment." "Multiple parties have expressed interest in your agricultural innovations, some with enthusiasm, others with concern." The true nature of this weather-forced visit became increasingly clear. This was no accidental seeking of shelter, but calculated inspection designed to catch them unprepared. The Royal Commissioner had deliberately timed his arrival for maximum strategic advantage. Unexpected, during harsh conditions when fields lay dormant, with no opportunity for carefully staged demonstrations. Eleanor recognized the political maneuvering behind this tactical approach. Crawford had clearly influenced the council to conduct surprise assessment, hoping to find fault or contradiction that could be weaponized against their methods. The stakes extended beyond agricultural debate into royal policy implications that could affect estates throughout the kingdom. "You must be exhausted from traveling in such conditions," she observed with practiced hospitality that revealed nothing of her strategic assessment. "Hot food awaits in the hall, with chambers being prepared for your comfort." "Most gracious," Fletcher replied with equal politeness, "though I hope we might speak of agricultural matters once we've attended to immediate comforts." The council is particularly interested in certain aspects of your methods that have generated discussion. We welcome the opportunity, Roland assured him with perfect composure. Our documentation stands ready for your review, along with practical demonstrations of techniques applicable even in winter conditions. As the visitors were escorted to warming food and drink, Eleanor and Roland exchanged brief, significant glance. Silent communication developed through months of partnership, indicating both recognized the challenge and opportunity this unexpected inspection presented. The game had escalated beyond local rivals' opposition into national agricultural policy implications. Their response to this surprise inspection would determine not just their estate's future, but potentially the adoption or rejection of their methods throughout the kingdom. What had begun as marriage alliance to save failing farm had evolved into battle for agricultural transformation, with consequences reaching far beyond their estate boundaries. The winter night that had started in quiet companionship now promised complex political chess match, requiring all their combined skills. Roland's agricultural expertise and Eleanor's diplomatic capabilities united against opposition that had gained powerful allies. Yet beneath the strategic concerns, Eleanor realized this unexpected crisis would reveal another dimension of their partnership: their ability to face external challenges as truly united front rather than merely aligned interests. The coming days would test not just their agricultural innovations, but the strength of bonds forming between them, both professional and increasingly personal. Morning brought no relief from the storm. Snow continued falling in heavy curtains, effectively sealing the estate from the outside world. For Sir Marcus Fletcher and his retinue, this meant extended stay, and for Eleanor and Roland, prolonged scrutiny. "A blessing disguised as challenge," Roland murmured, as they prepared for the day's inspection. "With travel impossible, Fletcher must see our methods in their entirety rather than selective demonstration." Eleanor nodded, arranging the documentation they had prepared for spring review. "And we control the narrative through continuous presence rather than single presentation." In the great hall, Sir Marcus waited with his 5 companions. Eleanor now recognized among them Sir William Hayes, the royal botanist whose writings on native plants she had studied, and Master Gregory Thornton, whose reputation as the king's soil specialist preceded him. This was no ordinary inspection party, but rather assembly of the kingdom's foremost agricultural experts. "I trust you rested well despite the unexpected circumstances," Eleanor greeted them, professional warmth masking strategic assessment. "Quite comfortably," Fletcher replied. "Your estate manages winter conditions with remarkable efficiency." Roland joined them, carrying several bound manuscripts. "We've prepared comprehensive documentation of our methods, though seeing practical implementation would provide clearer understanding." Fletcher's gaze sharpened with interest. "You maintain agricultural activities even in winter?" "The season limits field work, but not agricultural progress," Roland explained. "If you'll accompany us, we can demonstrate winter aspects of our approach." The day unfolded as methodical inspection across all aspects of the estate's agricultural innovations. Eleanor noticed how Fletcher and his experts divided responsibility. Hayes examining seed storage and propagation, Thornton inspecting soil samples collected before frost, others documenting tool modifications and structural improvements to barns and storage facilities. They began in the winter workshop, where Roland explained the modified spinning wheel and other equipment innovations. Master Thomas demonstrated improved wool processing techniques adapted from Eastern methods, producing finer thread with less waste. "Fascinating adaptation," commented Hayes, examining the mechanism. "The tension control seems inspired by Arabic designs I've encountered in manuscripts. Similar principles," Roland confirmed carefully, "though modified for English wool varieties, which differ significantly from Eastern sheep breeds." Eleanor noted this diplomatic phrasing, acknowledging foreign influence while emphasizing English adaptation. Roland had learned much about navigating cultural sensitivities since their marriage, tempering his direct approach with political awareness she had helped cultivate. From the workshop, they proceeded to the storage cellars beneath the manor. Here, Roland had implemented preservation techniques that significantly extended vegetable longevity. Root crops arranged in specialized sand beds remained firm and viable months longer than traditional methods allowed. "We've reduced winter food loss by nearly 60%, Eleanor explained as Thornton examined the sand composition, combining techniques from northern European settlements with insights from Mediterranean storage practices. Thornton nodded thoughtfully. The temperature management is particularly impressive. This corridor design creates natural air circulation that maintains consistent conditions. Throughout the morning, Eleanor observed subtle shift in the expert's demeanor, initial skepticism gradually yielding to professional curiosity. Only Fletcher maintained careful neutrality, his observations recorded without revealing judgment. The inspection continued through specialized grain storage facilities, where Roland had modified traditional granaries with ventilation systems that prevented moisture damage and reduced pest infiltration. The principle comes from observing how desert peoples preserve grain in extreme conditions, Roland explained. Airflow and strategic barrier design accomplish what poisons and constant monitoring cannot. By midday, even Fletcher seemed genuinely engaged rather than merely assessing. Over the meal Eleanor had arranged in the Great Hall, conversation shifted from formal inspection to collegial discussion. The royal botanist particularly engaged Roland regarding seed selection techniques, while Thornton and Eleanor discussed soil amendment strategies for depleted fields. Your approach integrates multiple traditions rather than adhering to single methodology, observed Hayes during a discussion of companion planting. Most agricultural reformers champion single system. Nature itself doesn't adhere to single system, Roland replied. Different challenges require appropriate adaptations. Dogmatic consistency helps theorists more than farmers. This philosophical exchange revealed underlying tension in royal agricultural policy. Eleanor recognized competing ideological camps represented among Fletcher's party, traditionalists who favored maintaining English methods untouched, moderate reformers seeking cautious improvements, and progressive voices advocating wholesale adoption of foreign innovations. Fletcher, whose position required navigating these factions, clearly sought balanced assessment. Your results speak clearly through harvest records, he acknowledged. Yet implementation questions remain substantial. How might average estate without your specific knowledge transfer these methods successfully? The question addressed practical heart-of-policy implications. Roland and Eleanor exchanged glances that communicated shared understanding of the critical juncture they faced. We've developed implementation approach tailored to English conditions, Eleanor explained, directing attention to illustrated manuscripts they had prepared. Progressive adoption rather than immediate transformation, beginning with soil assessment, and strategic crop rotation that requires minimal investment, Roland added. Knowledge transfer occurs through demonstration rather than abstract instruction. We've trained neighboring farmers through seasonal observation and guided practice, creating local expertise that spreads naturally. After the meal, despite continued snowfall, Fletcher requested inspection of field conditions. Wrapped in heavy cloaks, the party trudged through drifts to examine winter cover crops Roland had planted before the first frost, another innovation challenging traditional practice of leaving fields bare. These plants fix nitrogen in the soil, while preventing erosion, Roland explained, as Hayes examined the hardy greenery persisting beneath snow layer. Come spring, they'll be worked into the soil, providing natural amendment that reduces need for manure application. Remarkable vigor. Despite the cold, Hayes noted. Genuine admiration breaking through professional reserve. I've read theoretical proposals for winter soil protection, but rarely seen successful implementation in northern climates. As afternoon waned, Fletcher gathered his experts for private consultation in chambers Eleanor had assigned them. This expected development created opportunity for Roland and Eleanor to conduct their own strategic assessment. Hayes and Thornton seemed genuinely impressed, Eleanor observed, as they warmed themselves by the solar fire. The others remain divided. Fletcher maintains careful neutrality, Roland added, though his questions suggest practical interest beneath official caution. Eleanor considered their position thoughtfully. Crawford's influence clearly prompted this inspection, but its thoroughness works in our favor. They've seen practical implementation rather than merely reviewing documentation. The political dimension remains significant, Roland cautioned. Agricultural policy affects taxation, land management, and royal revenue streams. Our methods challenge existing power structures beyond mere farming techniques. This astute observation highlighted how thoroughly Roland had absorbed political complexities since their marriage. His initial focus on pure agricultural science had expanded to include understanding of court dynamics that influenced adoption or rejection of innovations. Eleanor appreciated this evolution in his thinking. Then we must address those dimensions directly during tonight's discussion. She stared thoughtfully into the fire. Crawford positions our approach as foreign intrusion threatening English tradition. We must reframe the narrative. Evening brought formal dinner in the Great Hall, the atmosphere charged with anticipation of Fletcher's preliminary assessment. Eleanor had arranged seating strategically, separating members of the inspection party to prevent reinforcement of existing perspectives. Through proximity, as servants cleared the main course, Fletcher finally addressed the underlying purpose of their visit. Lord and Lady Blackwood, your agricultural innovations have generated significant discussion within Royal Council. Improvements in yield cannot be disputed based on harvest records, yet questions remain regarding broader implementation. Eleanor noted the careful phrasing, acknowledgement of results paired with policy concerns rather than rejection of methods themselves. This suggested opportunity for productive engagement rather than defensive positioning. We understand the Council's responsibility to consider implications beyond single estate's success, she responded diplomatically. Which specific implementation aspects concern the Council most directly? Fletcher seemed appreciative of this direct approach. 3 primary considerations have emerged. Knowledge requirements for successful adoption by average estate managers, initial investment demands that might burden smaller holdings, and cultural resistance to techniques perceived as foreign rather than English in origin. Valid concerns, deserving thoughtful response, Roland acknowledged, his tone measured rather than defensive. May I suggest addressing each specifically? What followed was masterclass in strategic advocacy. Roland systematically addressed knowledge transfer through apprenticeship model already functioning with neighboring farms. Eleanor detailed scalable implementation, requiring minimal initial investment but creating progressive improvement. Together, they emphasized historical precedent for many techniques, tracing some to Roman Britain and others to monastic practices documented in English abbeys for centuries. These aren't foreign impositions, Eleanor emphasized, but rather reclamation of knowledge English farming possessed generations ago, combined with compatible innovations. The fundamental approach honors traditional understanding while addressing modern challenges. This reframing shifted the conversation significantly. Hayes particularly engaged with historical continuity argument, confirming certain techniques. Indeed, appeared in ancient manuscripts he'd studied in royal archives. The distinction between innovation and restoration proves critical, Fletcher observed, the first indication of his personal perspective emerging from official neutrality. Agricultural tradition itself evolved through centuries of adaptation, though we sometimes forget this natural progression. As formal discussion concluded, Fletcher made no definitive pronouncement. Appropriate given his role required comprehensive report to council rather than personal declaration. However, the evening's conversation had created foundation for potential endorsement rather than opposition. Later, as Eleanor and Roland reviewed the day's developments in their private chambers, both recognized significant progress despite remaining uncertainty. Fletcher's resistance softened substantially, Eleanor noted, brushing her hair before the fire. His questions shifted from skepticism to practical implementation curiosity. Hayes and Thornton became active advocates by dinner's end, Roland added. Their expertise carries substantial weight with council. Eleanor set down her brush, turning to face Roland. This inspection Crawford arranged to undermine us may instead provide official validation impossible to challenge effectively. Roland smiled, a rare, unguarded expression that transformed his stern features. Strategic patience yields unexpected victories, something this gruff knight continues learning from his diplomatically skilled wife. The compliment, delivered with genuine appreciation rather than mere courtesy, created moment of personal connection amid their tactical assessment. Eleanor felt growing appreciation for how thoroughly their partnership had evolved beyond initial arrangement. Professional respect deepening into genuine admiration and emotional investment neither had anticipated. The storm shows no sign of abating, she observed, moving to the window where snow continued falling heavily. Fletcher's party may remain several more days, providing opportunity to address remaining concerns through continued demonstration, Roland concluded. Crawford's weather-enforced extended inspection may prove his greatest miscalculation. The royal scrutiny that had arrived as potential threat had transformed into unexpected opportunity through their united response. Whatever challenges remained, they would face them with growing confidence in their partnership's strength. Agricultural innovation supported by political acumen, technical expertise, enhanced by diplomatic skill, and professional alliance increasingly enriched by personal connection, neither had sought, but both now valued beyond measure. Spring arrived with explosive abundance that even Roland hadn't fully anticipated. The fields that had been carefully prepared through winter months burst with vibrant crops arranged in patterns that maximized both soil health and yield. The Royal Commissioner's visit 3 months earlier had concluded with cautious endorsement, their official report still pending, but preliminary feedback suggesting favorable reception. Most significantly, neighboring estates had begun implementing modified versions of their methods, creating patchwork of innovation across the region that stood in visible contrast to those still clinging to traditional approaches. From the manor's highest tower, the difference was visible in dramatic demarcation, lush greenery where new techniques took root, struggling growth where old methods persisted. Eleanor climbed these tower steps on May morning to find Roland already there, surveying their expanding influence with rare expression of satisfaction. Lord Crawford's south fields show signs of experimental planting, he observed, pointing to distinct patterns visible on the horizon. Despite his continued public opposition, Eleanor smiled at this validation. The steward's brother works our northern border. Knowledge travels through family connections more effectively than formal proclamations. Practical results overcome philosophical objections, Roland agreed. Crawford may denounce our methods while quietly adopting them through trusted intermediaries. This political navigation had become a familiar pattern over recent months. Official resistance continued from certain quarters while practical implementation spread through informal networks. Workers sharing techniques, families exchanging seeds, communities observing flourishing results and adapting accordingly. Eleanor had mastered this delicate balance, maintaining diplomatic relationships with opposing lords, while creating pathways for innovation to spread beneath official notice. Her upbringing in nobility's complex social structures provided strategic advantage Roland's direct approach could never have achieved alone. "The Royal Council meets next week," she reminded him, joining his survey of the landscape. Fletcher promised decision regarding formal endorsement of selected techniques. Roland nodded, his expression revealing mixed emotions about this culmination of their efforts. Official adoption will protect these methods from further opposition, yet bureaucracy may diminish their effectiveness through partial implementation. Which is why we've focused on grassroots adoption rather than solely pursuing royal endorsement, Eleanor pointed out. By the time official policy emerges, practice will have established itself too thoroughly to be uprooted. Their conversation paused as Eleanor noticed unusual activity at the estate's main gate. Riders approached bearing royal colours, unexpected visitors arriving weeks before normal messenger schedule. "Something has changed," Roland observed, his tactical assessment immediate. "Those aren't regular messengers but royal guard escort." They descended quickly to the courtyard, arriving as the visitors were announced. Sir Marcus Fletcher himself had returned, accompanied by several officials bearing formal documentation. Lord and Lady Blackwood, Fletcher greeted them with formal bow that suggested official rather than personal visit. "I bring communication from the Royal Council regarding your agricultural innovations." Eleanor felt momentary apprehension despite their preparations. The timing suggested decision had been reached earlier than anticipated, perhaps indicating hasty judgment rather than thorough consideration. Fletcher continued without preamble. "After reviewing all evidence, including comprehensive report from our winter inspection, the Council has reached determination regarding implementation of your methods." Roland stood silently beside Eleanor, his warrior's composure revealing nothing of the tension she knew he must feel. This moment represented culmination of years dedicated to agricultural transformation, judgment on knowledge he had risked everything to acquire and implement. "The Royal Agricultural Commission hereby formally endorses selected techniques demonstrated at Blackwood Estate," Fletcher announced, unrolling official proclamation bearing royal seal. "Specific methods approved for implementation throughout the kingdom include systematic crop rotation, companion planting for pest management, and water conservation techniques." Relief washed through Eleanor, though she maintained dignified composure appropriate to the formal occasion. Partial approval was significant victory considering the political opposition they had faced. "However," Fletcher continued, "certain techniques have been designated for further study before potential broader implementation, including soil amendment methods using exotic minerals and irrigation systems requiring significant structural changes to existing fields. This reservation was expected. Complete endorsement would have represented radical departure from traditional royal caution. By approving fundamental techniques while reserving judgment on more ambitious innovations, the Council had found politically acceptable middle ground. Furthermore, Fletcher added, unexpected continuation capturing Eleanor's full attention. The Council has appointed Lord Roland Blackwood as Special Advisor to the Royal Agricultural Commission, with responsibility for overseeing implementation of approved methods and continuing research into advanced techniques. This appointment represented far more significant victory than mere technical approval. It granted Roland official authority to pursue agricultural innovation with royal protection, effectively neutralizing Crawford's opposition while creating a pathway for gradual introduction of more radical methods. The appointment comes with commission to establish Training Center for Agricultural Innovation, Fletcher continued, presenting second document, where estate managers throughout the kingdom may learn approved techniques under proper supervision. Eleanor glanced at Roland, noting the momentary surprise that crossed his normally impassive features. This development exceeded their strategic objectives, creating institutional framework for knowledge transmission that would outlast individual opposition. The Council recognizes Lady Eleanor Blackwood's essential contribution to developing implementation strategies suitable for English estates, Fletcher added, presenting third document, and requests her service as diplomatic liaison between Royal Agricultural Commission and regional nobility to facilitate adoption. This recognition of Eleanor's role represented significant departure from traditional practice, which typically acknowledged only male contribution to agricultural innovation. It validated the partnership they had developed and institutionalized Eleanor's diplomatic approach alongside Roland's technical expertise. The formal presentation concluded with details regarding resources allocated for training center establishment and timeline for progressive implementation across royal holdings. As Fletcher and his party were escorted to prepared accommodations, Eleanor and Roland retreated to their private solar to process these unexpected developments. "This exceeds our most optimistic projections," Eleanor observed once they were alone. "Crawford's opposition has not only failed, but transformed into opportunity for broader influence." Roland nodded, rare smile transforming his stern features. "The training center particularly changes everything. Knowledge constrained to single estate remains vulnerable. Knowledge institutionalized becomes legacy." "Your legacy," Eleanor emphasized, genuine pride evident in her voice. "Recognition of lifelong dedication to agricultural improvement." "Our legacy," Roland corrected firmly, taking her hands in rare gesture of physical connection. "This victory belongs to both of us in equal measure. My knowledge would have remained isolated curiosity without your diplomatic skill and community understanding." The moment held deeper significance than mere professional acknowledgement. Their partnership had evolved beyond strategic alliance into genuine union of complementary strengths, each incomplete without the other. "There's something I've been waiting to share," Eleanor said after comfortable silence had settled between them. "News I wanted to confirm before speaking." Roland's expression shifted to attentive concern, noting subtle change in her tone. "The estate physician confirmed yesterday what I've suspected these past weeks," Eleanor continued, momentary vulnerability beneath her usual composure. "We'll welcome child in autumn, around harvest time." The revelation stunned Roland into uncharacteristic speechlessness. Their marriage, begun as pragmatic arrangement between struggling estate and agricultural innovator, had gradually developed deeper dimensions neither had anticipated. This development represented transition from partnership to family, continuation, extending beyond their individual contributions. A child, Roland finally managed, emotion transforming his weathered features. His hands, calloused from years of practical demonstration alongside theoretical knowledge, gently touched Eleanor's still flat stomach. "Our knowledge carried forward through more than just agricultural legacy. Born into world, already transformed by that knowledge," Eleanor added softly, "inheriting both innovation and tradition." As spring sunshine filtered through leaded glass windows, casting diamond patterns across the solar floor, their embrace symbolized fuller union than either had imagined possible when desperate circumstances first brought them together. Their child would inherit not just revitalized estate and agricultural innovation, but example of partnership built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and love that had grown naturally from seemingly infertile arrangement. The following months brought implementation of Royal Commission's vision, The training center established in former barracks became hub of agricultural transformation, with estate managers from throughout Kingdom arriving for instruction in approved techniques. Roland's direct approach found perfect application in practical demonstration, while Eleanor's diplomatic skills smoothed political resistance that inevitably accompanied change. Their child grew alongside these developments, Eleanor's expanding form becoming visible symbol of abundance their methods created. Even Lord Crawford eventually abandoned public opposition, sending representative to training center while maintaining face-saving distance personally. Tactical retreat Eleanor recognized as ultimate victory. By harvest time, their influence had spread beyond original projections. Techniques once dismissed as foreign intrusion had become recognized agricultural wisdom, with visible results impossible to deny in side-by-side comparison. Yields increased, soil health improved, and communities suffered less vulnerability to irregular weather patterns. Eleanor's labor began appropriately during Harvest Festival, traditional celebration of abundance gaining deeper significance through their agricultural transformation. After hours that tested even her considerable strength, she delivered healthy daughter whose lusty cries suggested she had inherited both parents' determination. "Catherine," Eleanor whispered when Roland was finally permitted to join them, the name honoring his mother while connecting their child to future rather than merely reflecting past traditions. Roland cradled his daughter with hands that had transformed barren soil into flourishing fertility, the contrast between his scarred warrior's exterior and gentle touch embodying the journey that had brought them to this moment. "She has your strength," he observed softly, noting the infant's firm grasp around his finger, "and perhaps my stubbornness." "Formidable combination," Eleanor agreed with tired smile. "The world should prepare itself accordingly." As autumn sunlight bathed the chamber in golden warmth, 3 generations of transformation were represented: the battle-scarred knight whose ancient agricultural knowledge had saved failing farm, the nobleman's daughter whose diplomatic wisdom had enabled its implementation, and the child who represented both continuation and new beginning. What had begun as desperate marriage arrangement had blossomed into partnership that transformed not just their estate, but agricultural practices throughout Kingdom. The ancient knowledge Roland had brought from distant lands, combined with Eleanor's deep understanding of her community and traditions, created legacy that would outlive them both. In the flourishing fields surrounding their estate, in the training center spreading innovation across the land, and in the child who would carry forward the best of both traditions into future, neither could fully imagine, but both had helped create. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.